ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Mark Twain House and Museum. My name is Jacques Lamar. I'm the Director of Communications here at the museum, and it's my pleasure to welcome you all here tonight to the Hartford Courant Fox 61 Key Issues Forum on gun control. Before we introduce the folks, just want to remind you you're going to be captured on film not once but twice. It's going to be live streaming on Fox 61's website. As well as on CTN. So in order to avoid eternal embarrassment, please silence your cell phones. And thank you to those who filled out question cards. We're not going to have time to answer everybody's questions, but they'll try and get to as many as they can during the program. Mark Twain was a lousy shot by all accounts. But was always had dead aim with his words. And tonight is a conversation. I heard some people say they were here for debate. We're here for a discussion. And so we really want to be respectful of all opinions, even those that differ from our own. And we have a wonderful moderator who's going to lead us through the conversation. And I'd like to introduce Dan Haar from the Hartford Courant, who will introduce our speakers. Thank you all again for being here.
Thank you, Jacques. First, we'd like to thank Jacques Lamar at the Mark Twain House and Museum here. This is the Mark Twain Museum Center, and they've been very gracious. I don't know that there has been a current key issues forum here before, but it seems like a great place to be, and especially for this issue. We'd also like to thank Grace Bellinger for working out. I know many of you spoke with her on the phone. I'm sorry, Belanger. Sorry, Grace. And I'd like to just say a little bit before we get started. We have Mike Lawlor and Joe Bartozzi here from really exactly the right people we want to be talking about this issue. When we set out to do it, these are the two people we wanted because they're perhaps most involved on either side of the issue. I just want to, before I introduce them formally, I just want to say a little bit about the issue. What we have here with the gun control debate, you speak of a key issue. This is a key issue both in terms of all time and of this time right now. As most of you know, right now in the legislature, perhaps even as we speak, the leaders in the legislature are discussing language for bills that will be debated perhaps as early as next week. Mike knows more about that, and maybe we can talk about the specifics. And so it's the ultimate timely issue for right now, but it's also a universal issue. And so what we're doing is we're combining the standoff of something that seems intractable in much the same way as, for example, the abortion debate is, with the immediacy of a budget debate. It has to be done now. This is something that has to be done now. And so in that sense, gun control in 2013 in Connecticut, of all places, is uniquely urgent, and that's why it's great that you're all out here tonight. I would just want to say that Mark Twain, since we're in the Mark Twain Museum, would have had sharp barbs about both sides of this issue. I think, and I spoke with Jacques about that, I don't think there's any question that he would have had sharp criticism for both sides. I want to read a quote. "A city whose fame as an insurance center has extended to all lands and given us the name of being a quadruple band of brothers working sweetly hand in hand." 4 brothers working hand in hand. "The Colts Arms Company making the destruction of our race easy and convenient. Our life insurance citizens paying for the victims when they pass away. Mr. Batterson," he's speaking of James Goodwin Batterson, who founded Travelers but also made granite monuments. "Mr. Batterson perpetuating their memory with his stately monuments, and our fire insurance companies taking care of their hereafter." So there he takes a shot at the gun industry, but he also used as one of his great characters Hank Morgan, who was, to go back in time in a Connecticut Yankee, a firearms maker. And so it was a great issue then, and it is now. I want to introduce on my, I won't say far right, on my right, on your left, Joe. No. He is not far right. And I should say before we get going that both of these gentlemen have been remarkably gracious with their time and expertise, both with me and with, I think, everyone else in the press. And both are what I would say is moderate in discussing the issue as an intellectual issue of our time and not using, hard accusatory language and slogans. And I think they both are in that persona, and that's going to be the tone of our discussion tonight. Joe Bartozzi is the Senior Vice President and General Counsel of O.F. Mossberg Sons in North Haven. O.F. Mossberg has been in business since 1919, I believe. And Joe has been there since 1986, first as a quality engineer. He later, he went to undergraduate at Southern Connecticut State University. He later went to Quinnipiac Law School, and he lives down that way in Woodbridge, and the company is in North Haven, so he is truly a product of South Central Connecticut. His grandfather was an employee of Winchester Firearms. I don't know if that, well, we'll get to that. Joe has been very familiar with the debates over the whole sweep of this past generation, starting from the time that he got there, and he's been directly involved for the past several years. On my immediate right, Mike Lawlor is essentially he's Governor Malloy's point man on this issue. He is undersecretary of the Office of Policy and Management for Criminal Justice. Mike is from East Haven, and he was elected to the State House in 1986 after serving as a state prosecutor. Mike later became the co-chairman of the legislature's Judiciary Committee, where they adjudicated and heard a lot of bills on gun control over the years. He was appointed by Governor Malloy at the start of Governor Malloy's term. And with that, I'd like to get started with a question just broadly for both of you to talk about the bills, and I want to focus specifically about the AR-15, and that is the thing that is called an assault weapon by some, a modern sporting rifle by others, but we can agree that it is a military-style rifle, and that's the subject of a potential ban. But I'd like for you to talk just a little bit about the legislation that's bubbling up from the 3 or 4 different sources from your perspective. And let's start with Mike, since you're directly involved in fashioning that legislation.
Well, I'm not sure how directly involved I am at the moment. The legislature is working on the project. We, in the governor's office, are being consulted. The governor put out his own proposal. But let me put this in a little bit of context, because I think this is very important, and I know the governor would say the same thing if he was here. All of this is being discussed starting with the fundamental principle that under the United States Constitution, and more importantly under the Connecticut Constitution, the right to bear arms is a protected right. And in fact, the Connecticut Constitution is much more explicit than the federal Constitution, because it says every citizen has the right to bear arms in defense of themselves and the state. That's exactly what it says. So all of the discussions that are taking place begin with that fundamental understanding. Now, within that, everyone understands that with rights come responsibilities. And so the governor's proposals cover basically 2 categories. One is new legislation, and the other is better enforcement of existing laws, and in particular, focusing on irresponsible and criminal persons who own guns. And so those are the 2 key approaches. Now, you asked about the proposals involving the AR-15 type weapons. So there is something unique about these guns, right? And I think there's no question that in the recent past, let's say the past 20 years or so, the number of these guns being manufactured and put into circulation is truly unprecedented, right? And you and I, Dan, we talked the other day, there's like exponential growth in this. And so these are turning up increasingly in the mass shootings that have taken place. There hasn't been a lot of them, but the frequency is increasing, most recently, obviously, in Newtown. And I think the concern is this the type of weapon that should be generally available to civilians? So, and the governor has made a very clear decision, no. And together with that comes the issue of magazine capacity. There is something unique about the capability of a large capacity magazine, and that the governor's proposal is to be as reasonable as possible in terms of regulating gun ownership. And so his proposal is to limit magazine capacity to 10. So those are the two fundamental proposals. Joe?
Let me touch on that a little bit here. There's a lot in that answer, and I agree with some of what I heard there. However, just to point out for the audience, all rifles that are in common use today originated as military-style rifles. I mean, bolt-action rifles, look at the 1903 Springfield. That was the common military rifle of its day. So to say that the AR-15 platform is somehow different from what was done generation over generation is not exactly true. What we are seeing is a lot of the younger shooters that are coming in, either hunters or sportsmen, are comfortable with this platform. It's a very easy platform to modify, to adapt to a particular size of shooter. It's a very light recoiling rifle. So the fact that it happens to look like a military rifle is not coincidental, because the ergonomics of that rifle are actually quite superior. But as far as its overall power or its lethality, it's simply not any different, or in fact, in some ways, it's less than most of your common deer hunting rifles. To touch on the magazine issue just a little bit, I mean, Mike had it exactly right when the Article 1, Section 15 talks about defense of oneself and the state. You have a right to self-defense with a firearm. It's clear in our state constitution. And I don't know about anybody here, but I've never heard anybody who's defending themselves say, oh, I wish I had fewer bullets. So when you talk about defense, you know, I think the state getting involved in arriving at some arbitrary number of rounds that's acceptable to them, I don't think I'm comfortable with that idea. You know, you could say, well, is 10 better than 30, or is 20 the right number, or is 15? No one can say for sure, but if there is a right to self-defense recognized in the state constitution, I don't believe that the state should be involved in telling me how much I can use to defend myself or anybody else.
I might have mentioned that Joe is on the board of governors of the National Shooting Sports Foundation, which is based in Newtown and represents manufacturers and retailers in the industry. Their survey shows, they have a number of, a bit of research in the industry. Their survey is showing that 33% of the users of the modern sporting rifle or the military-style rifles have used magazines of 30 or larger. We know that there are about 5 million of these rifles that have been made since 1990 by domestic manufacturers, not for export. So that there are a large number out there. And the question I want to, you go ahead. I want to ask.
I was going to say, I mean, I appreciate that you're giving those numbers, because in point of fact, more people are killed with clubs and hammers or fists and feet than they are with rifles. So we want to say yes, the number of manufacturers creating or designing these types of rifles certainly has been on the rise. At the same time, gun ownership is way up, gun violence is way down, crime is down, more people killed with hands and feet than with rifles. So I think we're creating, as we talked about, there are things the legislature can do to help public safety. And there's not one person in this room that is opposed to supporting and working on public safety, not one person. However, the focus needs to be on where they can really come to common ground and work things out in a fair and constitutional fashion, and I think that's what we ought to be focusing on.
Mike, are those great numbers that we talk about, perhaps 100 million 30-round magazines in circulation, 5 million military-style rifles in civilian circulation, are they a reason to move forward especially, or are they a reason not to move forward on a ban?
Well, I think that it's sort of logical, right? If there's a lot more of these extraordinary weapons, these AR-15s in circulation, it is possible that there'll be a lot more use of those in these mass killings, and that's essentially what we've seen. We've seen the frequency begin to increase. And if that trend continues, obviously you've got a serious problem. And so the question is, have we gotten far enough to say that this is a trend where we ought to step in and regulate this, limit it in some fashion, or wait for more time to go by? So I think many people, and there seems to be a general consensus on this in the state, if you look at the public opinion polls, many people feel, okay, we've gotten to that point. We need to regulate these types of weapons more than we've done in the past and prohibit the future sales of these types of weapons. So I think that's where we are, and it seems like there's a consensus that it seems like there's a certain inevitability to this at the moment. And
to the ban?
Yes.
I don't know that. Are you saying there's an inevitability in support in the legislature,
yes,
or an inevitability in the momentum of the population's opinion? Which are you saying?
Both.
Joe, do you agree with that?
I can't say. I don't know if I agree with that or not. I don't know. I don't know what the legislature is doing. I've had a number of meetings in Hartford, and I'm getting mixed signals depending on who I talk to. So, I mean, to say that these weapons are somehow extraordinary or different from any other weapon, I have a hard time with that. And by the way, I think that the polls that are taken, I wonder how many people who are giving their answers understand that Connecticut already has an assault weapons ban. I mean, if someone says to you, well, are you for banning assault weapons? It sounds like a good idea. But if you tell people, do you know that Connecticut has a ban on assault weapons? And do you know further that the firearm used in Sandy Hook was not, in fact, an assault weapon under either federal or state law?
Well, let me just interject with a bit of definition. There's a disagreement about the definition of what an assault weapon is. By a clear and unanimous definition agreement, an assault weapon, a fully automatic firearm is an assault weapon. Those are available only to very special cases in the civilian population, to law enforcement agencies, and especially, of course, to the military. That would be the M16 and the M4 in the case of the AR-15 type platform. There is a definition in law of an assault weapon which is banned, and that includes some semi-automatic, not just fully automatic weapons. The industry doesn't tend to agree that that's called an assault weapon. We don't need to get into semantics. We certainly agree they are military style. But just to clarify that. And Mike, I want you to respond to that about let's really dig in here as to what people want isn't it clear that there is no agreement, and yet you said there's an agreement that that's where we're going?
I just said I think it's inevitable that there will be a ban enacted this year in Connecticut. That essentially is what people have been talking about. It seems like there's a real consensus there. What's being discussed, the details of what they're arguing about now don't relate to that.
Okay, fair enough. And does that include the magazines as well?
There will definitely be legislation on magazines. The details that are being discussed are sort of peripheral.
Okay, I don't want to get too technical in this discussion about the ban, but suffice it to say that the ban that's in place now in Connecticut and I believe 6 other states, and the ban that was in effect from 1994 to 2004, the federal ban, allowed for not an exception, but they allowed for versions of the AR-15 to be made. And Joe, I believe that Mossberg, among many other manufacturers, makes a version that's legal for sale in Connecticut.
That's correct.
Is that going to, in the 2013 ban in New York, I believe it could look like an outright ban on all forms of that rifle. Is that the way you understand it?
Based on the general characteristics of those types of rifles, that's correct. It would be an outright ban on that style of rifle. And by the way, just to point out that because they're basing their legislation on features, it would encompass probably half of our product line in one way, shape, or another, including our .22 caliber rimfire rifles that have certain features. I mean, so this is they're casting such a wide net based on cosmetics, frankly, that this is where we've objected to this. We think that this is not very well thought out, and in fact, thousands of people came to the state capitol, legislative office building, in protest of these arbitrary feature-specific bans.
Well, let's talk about it. Mike, is it? I think we can agree that in terms of the momentum of the round that's being fired, this military-style weapons, these weapons are not more powerful. But let's talk about the psychology of the weapons. Is there something that makes it more dangerous by virtue of the features that it has? And is that behind some of the thinking in the legislature here and elsewhere?
Well, I think it's uniquely designed to accomplish the goal that apparently Mr. Lanza had when he went to the school that day. I mean, I think this is the perfect weapon if this is your goal. You want to kill a lot of people as quickly as possible. And obviously this is a very useful tool to have it. That's why we've seen it in the last couple of years, actually. You know, I think there's been 60 mass shootings in the last 30 years. and I'm trying to remember the exact number. I think it's 7 of them took place last year. So the frequency is definitely increasing. The frequency with which this type of weapon is a part of it. You know, we had the Newtown shooting, you had the 2 firefighters in upstate New York, you had the thing in the theater in Colorado. So it does seem like there's a unique appeal of this weapon to people whose goal it is to just kill as many people as possible. And it is what I would pick if that was my goal, right? You can fire a lot of rounds very quickly, very accurately. It's lightweight. And that, I think, is the concern. The governor would be the first to say that the vast majority of gun owners in Connecticut are responsible, law-abiding citizens. There's no question about that. But sometimes a few people ruin it for everybody. And I think that's what is taking place here. And I think the government has an obligation to impose reasonable restrictions, even in a situation where there's a constitutional right involved. We do this with other constitutional rights, the right to vote, the right to get married. But it has gotten to the point where there seems like there's a true consensus among the citizenry at large, and there's clearly a consensus in the legislature to do something along the lines that we're discussing here.
Right. This is the point that the legislature and other legislatures have focused on the tool and failed to focus on the human element here. What we have at these mass shootings is mental illness, severe mental illness that could have and should have been detected. Unfortunately, as something that the industry has supported for years, a lot of states don't provide timely information on their background checks. The National Instant Criminal Check System is not being provided with timely data regarding mental health status. The fact that you may have a restraining order taken out against you, that information from many states is just not coming in. So we're doing a real disservice to the people of our states by not having that data present. So, you know, to me, you look at the issue and say, well, let's just ban guns because it's easy. That's a comfort zone for politicians. The fact of the matter is gun bans, no matter where they've been enacted or when they've been enacted, have never been proven to reduce crime, ever. So to look at that and to fail to look at issues like mental health availability, I think is simply short-sighted. And there's a rush to, let's do something now, let's do something quick. We don't even know the full reports out of Sandy Hook. How were those firearms stored? Why was this young man left alone, left adrift to create and think of these crazy things in his mind? I mean, this is something that we're failing as a society if we don't look at the human aspect of this crime. You focus on the weapon, the tool, that's easy. That's easy. The hard thing, the root cause, is not the gun. The root cause is the human. If you don't deal with that issue, you're not going to get anywhere meaningful.
I think, as we've discussed, there are a lot of... Go ahead.
I just want a couple of things. First of all, and Joe knows this, that Connecticut does comply with NICS. We do enter in all the information, and we're one of the relatively few states that does that, and we actually learned the hard way many years ago in the aftermath of the lottery shooting. But having said that, Dan, you asked that we focus only on the assault weapon and the magazines in this initial part of the discussion, but I just want to say that is a small part of what the governor is proposing. And all the things you've just mentioned are, in fact, a very important part. I would argue even a more important part of combating this. We have a law on the books in Connecticut, the gun seizure law, which was enacted in 1999 in the aftermath of the lottery shooting. It's focused on persons with behavioral issues, perhaps mental health issues, who have access to guns. And it has been very aggressively used in the years since then. In fact, since the Newtown shooting, the number of people calling the police and calling about people that they know have access to guns and it's clear that there's behavioral issues has increased very significantly, because we do believe that this is a very real problem. And we'll find out at some point why it was that nobody in Newtown decided to sound the alarm on the Lanza family. We'll figure this out. But had they done it, this would not have happened. There's no question about that. And first and foremost, people should know if you see something, you should say something. You have an obligation to act. And that is something the governor feels very strongly about. And much of his proposal focuses on changing the standards for issuing pistol permits, broadly expanding the permitting thing so that we can monitor what people are doing, so we can ensure that people who have mental illness or engage in other behavioral issues and become irresponsible gun owners are separated from their guns. That's a very important part of our process, and I know that all law-abiding citizens agree with that. And that is the principal focus of what the governor is proposing.
My sense is that there's agreement, but not broad and total agreement on some of the other measures. Let's talk about the registration, the broadening of registration, Joe. I know you've spoken about that with me and some others. specifically potentially the registration of all either long guns, rifles, or all guns that have a pistol grip. Let's talk about that.
Let's touch on that a little bit. You know, when someone buys a firearm at retail, a copy of a form from the state goes to the state police, goes to the local police. The cops know who has guns in their town because the forms from the state go there. Okay, so if you take that out of the equation, then you factor in the thought that gun shows criminals don't acquire their guns from gun shows. Okay, we've done poll after poll in prisons. They're just not getting guns from gun shows. They're stealing their guns. They're not buying them at gun shows. So the idea that, well, if we just register all long guns or make people go through this thing, you're going to capture a tiny percentage of, frankly, law-abiding citizens. So, I mean, there may be some advantage to having different background checks. I don't know. If I look at the law, I can give you a better opinion. But, I mean, to me, there might be some comfort in saying, gee, I'd like to know who I'm selling my gun to because it protects me and it protects the state. I understand that. But just arbitrarily saying, well, we'll just make you register everything, all you're going to capture are the law-abiding people. You're not going to capture the criminal. And until we start focusing on criminal control as opposed to gun control, we're not going to get anywhere.
But I think you could use that argument to oppose universal background checks, and yet I think there is more or less agreement that background checks, expanding them to all sales, is a reasonable measure. Is that fair to say?
I guess it would depend on how it's done. I mean, for example, I know a retailer, and I'll put my lawyer hat back on for a moment here and talk about products liability law. A retailer who has to do a background check for, let's say, you and me. Okay, now that transaction takes place. If I go out with that rifle or pistol or shotgun and I have an accident and I bring a products liability lawsuit against the manufacturer, if I'm the plaintiff's lawyer, I'm bringing in you too because you were part of that transaction. So now a retailer who never sold the product simply facilitated a transaction is going to get caught up in a products liability lawsuit for nothing more than doing some paperwork and making a phone call to the instant check system. That's a real problem. And I can tell you, we've done a poll. The National Shooting Sport Foundation did a poll. Retailers are overwhelmingly opposed because the burden is going to place on them. Now, is there a way to work it out? I don't know. I said, if I look at the language of the bill, I might be able to offer some constructive criticism. But if I'm a retailer, I'm really uncomfortable about taking on added liability in a transaction where there's no money, there's no profit in it for me. I'm just facilitating a transaction. So I think there needs to be some. And by the way, universal background checks. If I want to give my shotgun to my son or my daughter, I got to go through a background check. Who knows them better than I do?
You do. If you want to give them your car, you do.
You have to register the car. You do.
Can I just on details, right? So we don't know what the legislature is ultimately going to come up with in terms of exact language, but I do know what the governor proposed, and we already have a system for background checks. It's very easy to use, especially if you already have a permit to carry, right? Since 1994, the law in Connecticut has been every transfer of a handgun, whether it's a private sale, whether it's at a gun show or from a firearms dealer, has to follow the same rules, right? You got to make sure the person to whom you're transferring it has a permit. You've got to call the state police and get an authorization number to validate the transfer, and then you fill out a form to show that this gun now belongs to the other person. And so this is the system that the governor is proposing expanding to most, if not all, long guns. And so it is already in place. People know how it works. Now, we do know that if you expand it, we need to increase the staffing at the state police. And talking to some of the retailers, it's clear that the waiting time is too long for the phone calls. So that we are committed to ensuring that the staffing is there to make sure that if someone has a permit, and if you just want to validate that transfer, you're able to do it in a reasonable period of time, not a 6-hour wait. And so that's part of it. This is a system that's already in place, and all we would need to do is expand it to more types of guns.
Let's talk about, Joe touched on the liability question, and let's talk about that because it's been a sensitive issue, and the degree to which sellers and manufacturers of firearms are or are not protected from liability lawsuits, I think has been a lightning rod issue that I think is misunderstood. Just briefly, is that something you'd like to see, Mike, loosened?
Well, it's a federal law that establishes this virtual immunity, and
but the state has the ability to change the definition of what liability is.
I'm not sure we can get around the federal law because I think the federal law essentially prohibits states from from doing that.
Well, let's talk about what's there and what you'd like to see happen.
Well, I mean, we have some liability law. I mean, we obviously have a criminal liability if you knowingly sell or give a gun to someone that you know is prohibited from owning it, or you have a reason to believe they're going to use it in a crime. That is a crime. Forget about liability. But there is strict liability that flows from that, and that's not protected by the federal immunity. So, I mean, I think everyone would agree that if you knew somebody wasn't allowed to have it and you sold them a gun anyways, that there should be a penalty for that. I think the real question comes in, and I don't really have an opinion one way or the other on this, but is should we treat firearms like virtually all other products in the country, whereas if you make dangerous firearms or you market them in an irresponsible way, then there is some liability attached to it. We've seen this with tobacco. We've seen it with automobile manufacturing. These are sort of universal standards, and there is a unique protection for firearms in this regard, and you know, I guess, generally speaking, in my opinion, I think a gun is a product, and it should be subject to all the rules that govern any other kind of consumer product.
In fact, firearms are governed by standard strict liability and negligence torts laws. The fact that in 2005 President Bush signed the Protection of Lawful Commerce in Arms Act was a direct result of municipalities all over the country ganging up all at once and suing gun manufacturers with the sole intent of putting them out of business. I can tell you that our company spent hundreds of thousands of dollars defending itself from baseless lawsuits, politically motivated lawsuits. So now let's talk about what PLACA is and what it isn't. PLACA says if a firearm is lawfully sold and then a third party, a criminal, uses that firearm in the commission of a crime and intentionally pulls the trigger and shoots somebody, the manufacturer can't be held liable for any damage that result. So the sale has to be lawful. It has to be in accordance with all federal regulations. The firearm must be non-defective in either design or manufacture. There's more exceptions to the rule than there are rules there. But in point of fact, it's no different than saying if I go out and get my car and intentionally mow down people waiting in line at the movie theater, that those people can go back and sue General Motors. It's no different. The analogy is exactly the same. All we're saying is, I'll tell you, and I went to the Pentagon before that bill was enacted, and I sat with the Undersecretary of Defense and said, look, we're a family business. We're manufacturing shotguns for the Marine Corps, the Navy, the Army. I said, now we're under assault. We've got a dozen lawsuits we're facing to try and put us out of business. There's something wrong here with the system, because where are you going to get your firearms from if you close down all the American manufacturers? You're going to buy them from Turkey, or you're going to buy them from China? This is the problem here. So all they're saying is, hey, if the lawful stands for, but somebody intentionally, criminally uses that firearm, the manufacturer's not liable. And by the way, American jurisprudence has recognized that doctrine forever. Right. Forever.
And I think that's also, that core question is at the heart of the question of the ban, and that is how far do you go in impeding rights, either rights of people who may sue or rights of citizens in order to protect. Now, if an outright ban in Connecticut, we know that from last week there isn't going to be one this year in the out of Congress in Washington, but if an outright ban in Connecticut and a significant number of other states would save a few lives, maybe. Is it worth doing, even knowing, and this is really a question that sort of attacks both sides, even knowing that assault rifles or military-style rifles or modern sporting rifles account for an infinitesimally small number of the 11,000 a year gun deaths in America, an unbelievably small number. So do you craft policy that impedes, let's not say the rights, but let's say the lives of 5, 6, 7, 8 million people for that?
Well, as with many things, it's a balancing, right? And the concern is, as I said earlier, that the number of these types of weapons in circulation today is far different than it was even 10 years ago. I mean, the growth in the manufacture and marketing of these things is exponential, and unabated, presumably it would continue. I mean, the backlog at many of the AR-15 manufacturers in Connecticut is a couple of years at least. And so will there come a time where there's so many in circulation that the types of incidents we saw at Newtown become more commonplace? And I think already you can show that the frequency is increasing. And the only real question is, at what point do you step in and say, although firearm ownership is lawful, there's certain types of firearms that should not be in civilian hands. Now, keep in mind, the country's been through this before, right? In the early 1930s, machine guns were a problem, and back then they were virtually outlawed. That's changed a little bit. I mean, you can legally own them now, but you have to jump through quite a few hoops to legally own a machine gun. And I do think it's fair to say that since that time, the use of machine guns in murders has really virtually disappeared.
Yeah. Talk about machine guns. I mean, you think about what happened in that era. That was the era of prohibition. The government stepped in and said, we're going to ban alcohol. What did they do? They created organized crime. They created the environment where people would use these violent tactics to protect their territory. So, again, bans, if you look at bans anywhere in the world, they have simply not done anything to reduce crime or violence. The fact that people are buying and selling more firearms than ever before, yet the crime rate continues to go down, I think is a clear indication. Another thing I would say about this, you talk about the Constitution. I don't know what bans will do, but I know from reading the history that they don't do much. In fact, the studies from the 94 to 2004 assault weapons ban showed the effect was virtually zero on crime in this country. So, but I do know one thing is constitutional protections ought to be very jealously guarded. Since the McDonald case came out a couple of years ago, the Supreme Court has said the ownership of a firearm is a fundamental right, which requires strict scrutiny on any court determining those laws. So, I mean, people throughout generations in the history of this country have fought and died for the ideals and the principles laid out in the Declaration of Independence and the U.S. Constitution. And I don't think that it's so easy. I don't think we should easily just give away rights because those rights don't come back by and large.
Mike, do you agree that the 10-year federal ban had little or no effect on crime? And if so, is that because of the structure of the ban?
No, I think, keep in mind, so the general talk we're talking about is people getting killed, right? And in particular, people getting killed with guns. And so that happens through suicides, it happens through murders, it happens through accidental shootings. And of course, the vast majority of people who are killed or shot with firearms are being shot with handguns. There's no question about that. But it's also true that during the period of that ban, there were not a lot of AR-15 type weapons manufactured in this country. However, since the expiration of the ban, 2004, the number of these weapons has, and I've said this several times tonight to get the point, there's just a lot more in circulation. And so one concern you would have is if, in fact, there's a lot more of these in circulation, would you expect there to be a lot more of these mass shooting type events? And certainly the frequency is beginning to increase. And so it's logical to think that's going to continue. And if that's true, where do you draw the line? That's number one. Number two, when it comes to murders, to shootings, there's basically three general categories. There's the people with behavioral issues who go out and shoot people just to keep score or whatever. I mean, that seems to have been the case in Newtown. That's one category. The other category is these urban shootings, which typically involve young African-American men. We see it in Hartford, New Haven, and Bridgeport. There's a different approach to that. And the third category is domestic violence, right, where weapons are used to kill a spouse or family member or whatever. And so each of those are three distinct problems. Each has a unique response. I'm happy to say in Connecticut we're responding to all three with very good results. The shootings are down, et cetera, over the last few years. But this is a unique problem, right? And how many of these have to happen before you say that if we can prevent some of these by restricting the future manufacturing of these type weapons, is it worth doing? And this is a decision that people get to make. That's what legislatures are for. That's what elections are for. And so that's the real question. Do you think there are so many of these in circulation that the time has come to put an end to it, or is it fair to just let it keep going and see what happens?
This line of reasoning assumes a cause and effect relationship between firearms and violence. And there's been no studies to support that whatsoever. I mean, I can show you studies that tell them that clearly indicate a correlation between the sale of ice cream cones and murder rates in big cities. That no one would suggest that ice cream causes murder or vice versa. So what I would suggest is we need to look closer at the root cause of the issue and understand what is going on in the last few years. Is it the guns, or is it video games? Is it the glorification of murder and mayhem in movies coming out of Hollywood? I mean, no one's really looking at that issue, and I will submit to you that the human side of this equation is being vastly explored.
This is a good time to get to the first audience question. I want to change gears and start asking questions from the audience. Some of you submitted questions, and I thank you for that. We also had some questions that were submitted to us by email. Rich Boritz from Sandy Hook asks a great question. How can we get past the barriers that get put up between people when the for and against camps express their opinions concerning ways to reduce gun violence? We need to find ways to limit access to weapons by those people who are deemed dangerous, yet the discussions about how to do this break down and reasonable solutions end up hopelessly stuck. Let's start with you, Joe, and then Mike.
We've been saying all along that the real issue is, in fact, access to firearms. Now, the legislature is spending a lot of time looking at gun bans and magazine bans and all this stuff. But you know what? Things like straw purchasing, which I think you would get concession on all sides of the debate to say, hey, we need to be stronger and more tough on people that buy guns illegally for other people. Why isn't that bill on the governor's desk right now? How about gun trafficking? We have consensus, I'm sure, that gun trafficking is a problem in this country and in this state. So why hasn't the legislature said, let's get a gun trafficking bill that will get on the governor's desk right now and get signed? Those two steps where we can have good consensus could be done, and that potentially could save lives. But here we are, we're going to have some kind of a gigantic bill which is going to have all sorts of things in it that some people are going to agree with, some people are going to disagree with, and I'm telling you, that's giving the politicians, no offense, political cover. It's giving them cover so they don't have to vote for or against something that they feel strongly about. So if you really want to make a difference, let's do it now. Get a gun trafficking bill on the governor's desk. Get a straw purchasing bill on the governor's desk. But no, we're going to wait and talk about guns and gun bans that historically have never proven effective. Let's stop looking at the same old tired things and start looking at better ways where we can reach consensus and have a meaningful effect on the safety of our citizens.
So here's a... So here's something where Joe and I almost completely agree, and I think if the governor were here, he'd say the same thing. Why aren't these bills on my desk right now? And the other thing is, just to emphasize, I would rather be talking about the things that you're emphasizing, because I actually think that the major part of what needs to be done is dealing with how to intervene effectively in people who are showing these.
That's the governor's ear, so you can make it.
The governor agrees too, and if you read his proposal, you'll see that Dan has chosen the topics, which I respect because these are the controversial parts. But there is a significant need to beef up our ability with new laws and new priorities for everybody who works for the state and local governments, whether it's police or teacher or anything, to understand what the warning signals are and to act on them and give the tools that are necessary to the frontline criminal justice professionals to do something when the warning signs manifest. There's no question. That is by far the most important part of what needs to be done. It's true that the assault weapon issue and the magazine issue, both of which are important to the governor and important to me, take up most of the airtime in terms of the debates, and I understand why that is, because that's where you see the most skirmishing among the decision makers, the policy makers. But the truth is that the real energy is being expended right now at the Capitol talking about these issues, because that's the complicated part, but we are committed to do it. This is the major part of what we would like to accomplish, and if those bills were on the governor's desk today, he would sign them, and he's getting a little bit impatient as well. I think you've seen that in the public statements. He thinks all of these things need to be done, not just one, not just a ban, but all of these things need to be addressed as part of an integrated whole. Whether it's a series of bills or one big bill, it doesn't really matter, but the time has come to take action.
It's a question, guys. I didn't say anything at the start about holding applause or using applause. This is not the Jerry Springer show, but it's also not a recital by Yo-Yo Ma. So there's something, but we're running out of time. We want to keep this to about an hour, and so to the extent that there's applause, that cuts into our time. A question for Joe from a Jennifer Killen about your business, and I think it's a broad sort of question. On your website, it says, "Don't be timid when it comes to gun safety." What does Mossberg and Sons do to promote all aspects of gun safety among its customers? How can you make guns safer? And I would ask you not to give a comprehensive answer, because I've heard that, and it's a long answer. But I want to give you I want you to give a sense of that answer.
Well, there's a couple things we do. Obviously, the safety aspect of a firearm goes into it when it's still on the drawing board. Okay, you design a firearm to be safe for all foreseeable uses, so that the user is safe and protected. Now, on top of that, you have a very sophisticated set of warnings that go with every firearm, and I spend a good deal of my time reading the fine print and the warnings and making sure that they're appropriate and accurate, so for the safety of our users. Second of all, or third of all, Mossberg was one of the very first gun companies in the world to start putting locking devices with its firearms, and since that time, we've given away over 9.5 million firearm locks, and that helps with safe storage. And I'll tell you, it cuts across all aspects of the debate. If you have a firearm, they say with great power comes great responsibility. And as responsible gun owners, if the firearm is not in your direct control, it ought to be locked so that it can't be accessible to children or other at-risk individuals. And this cuts across the issue of suicide prevention, safety prevention, keeping children away from firearms. So we fully support and have supported for many, many years safe storage laws and providing that means for our customers. On top of that, we provide very detailed literature, and one of our pamphlets says, if you're not willing to take these responsibilities, you shouldn't have a firearm. If you're not going to be responsible about keeping guns and ammunition separate or keeping guns out of the hands of children, then maybe a firearm is not for you. And I respect everybody's right to keep and bear arms, everybody. But doesn't mean I say you must have a firearm. If you're not comfortable or you can't be responsible about it, so be it. Maybe it's best you don't have one. So, I think, again, the design of the product is certainly reliable and safe. The locking system, the literature, all that goes hand in hand towards providing for safer product.
You have something on that, or just move to the next question? Okay, good. We have in the audience Mr. Scott Ennis. I'm not unfortunately calling on the audience for questions, but there is Mr. Ennis here. He's with a group dedicated to firearms rights for disabled Americans here in Connecticut, and he submitted a question for Mike, which is, as it turns out, the AR-15, and I think we've written about this a little bit, is uniquely suited for firing by people who are disabled because of its flexibility and adaptability and so forth. And is that a sort of a special case infringement of the rights of those people by enacting a broad ban?
Well, it's an interesting theoretical question, but there's a difference between uniquely suited and it's the only type of weapon that can be used. So I guess I'm not an expert enough on firearms to know whether there's other firearms that could be used, but that would be an interesting case to bring to court.
Okay, and the reason that I brought that up is because it gets to the sort of when you enact a broad ban, what are the ramifications? Joe, I wanted to turn to another question about your business. Mossberg has, this isn't worded in the question, but I know that Mossberg has 265 employees. You have a factory of about the same size in Texas. What would a ban do to, a ban only in Connecticut now, and perhaps a few other states? What would that ban do to your business, both directly and indirectly?
It's very difficult to put quantitative figures to that, but based on some of the proposals we've seen, as I said earlier, a ban on certain features on firearms would cut across about 50% of our product line, affecting about 25% total of our production. Now, how much of that is parsed out to Connecticut is very difficult for me to say. I don't know that to be sure. But you say Connecticut, New York, New Jersey, California, Hawaii, Colorado. Before you know it, it's not just one state, Connecticut, it's several states. And obviously it's a concern based on features alone. The fact that our turkey hunting shotgun has a pistol grip all of a sudden makes it evil. Is it not the same firearm? We had people from the governor's own policy center into the factory. Said, look, here's a .22 caliber target rifle. Here's one that has a pistol grip, but it's exactly the same gun. Shoots exactly the same bullet at exactly the same speed. One looks different than the other. That one's banned. This one's not. It's not logical.
A follow-up, guys. A follow-up question that I know the questioner would have asked, which is, does a pistol grip make the firearm in some senses more safe? We've had this debate. There's a degree to which it makes it more deadly, and there's a degree to which it makes it more safe. And I'd like to have both of you sort of address that. If you're banning something, you may be bringing on more accidents than fewer.
One of the things that we've always stressed with our products is that. And I've been a competitive shooter for many, many years, and I can tell you the value of gun fit to a shooter with regard not only to accuracy but especially to safety is absolutely paramount. So the fact is, the AR-style rifle is so ergonomically, it's so excellent ergonomically speaking, that it makes it very easy to shoot. There's a very low recoil. I mean, we have an engineer at work who has had fusion surgery on his wrist. He can't shoot a standard stock rifle anymore. He has to use a pistol grip style. So that question about the handicapped or the disabled is absolutely on point to what I've seen with my own eyes. So the fact of the matter is, the style of the rifle is not more deadly. It doesn't shoot any faster or slower. It simply makes it more ergonomic in terms of controlling that firearm.
Mike, I don't know that it isn't more deadly because of its usability. Is that your view when you look at potential legislation?
Here's the thing. As I said earlier, there's either going to be more of these mass shootings in the future or there's not. And the more of these mass shootings that take place using these types of weapons, the more likely it is there's going to be a comprehensive ban. It's as simple as that. And it seems to me that that there's so much innovation in the gun industry, because Connecticut has a great history of that sooner or later there's going to be a combination of public policy that makes it virtually impossible to buy new weapons in this category, and the innovation will be that we can make weapons that don't have that kind of capability but suit the needs of someone who's concerned about self-defense or hunting or sport shooting, target, whatever. But this is solely going to be dictated by future events. And if I were in the gun industry, or if I were a law-abiding, responsible gun owner, I'd be looking for ways to change behavior among gun owners to ensure that these things don't happen in the future. So that might be the design of the weapon. It might be oversight of people who have these guns. But this is purely going to be dictated by future events. So if there's no more mass shootings, there'll be no more gun control. If this continues, the pressure is going to build and build. And the only reason we're sitting here tonight is because of that incident in Newtown. And the frequency, and there was, as I said, I think 7 of these last year, which was more than any year before that. Most of these involved AR-15 type weapons. And if this continues, the pressure is going to build and build and build. So it's in the interest of the responsible gun owners, I think, on their own, without prompting by the legislature, to figure out a solution to this problem. Because left unabated, the reaction is going to be more extreme in the future. So we all can agree that responsible gun ownership is an important goal, right? And we all can agree that there may be some weapons that ought not to be put in civilian hands. I think we can all agree about, nuclear devices and hand grenades and that kind of stuff. So the question is, where do you draw the line? And I think there's a consensus that's emerged that there's something about these guns that's over that line.
Well, Mike, you just answered the next question, which was, had the tragedy in Newtown not occurred, would we be here? And I think we all know that we wouldn't, but that's not necessarily a reason for us not to be here. Joe, I'd like to have you talk about that a little bit. If we don't do something, will it go on unabated? Will it keep growing exponentially? Mossberg began selling the modern sporting rifle in February of 2012, relatively late. A two-part question. Why did the company need to do that or feel the need to do that? And two, is it the case that left unabated, this will go on uncontrollably?
Mossberg is a company that responds to its customers' requests. Our customers determined that, based on the market, that it would make sense for us to go in that direction. And we invested over $4.5 million and brought in several new machining centers to be able to build a quality product right here in Connecticut. So, I mean, we're very proud of that fact. The fact that we were late to the game is it's not relevant at this moment, but in fact we were late to the game. Now, as far as will these things go on unabated, I mean, who's to say? What we can say is more people are killed with hammers than they are with rifles, so maybe we start registering hammers. I mean, all I'm saying is we support responsible ownership. I think if we don't start focusing on things like violent video games and movies and mental health services, yeah, maybe these things will go on. But I'll submit that if it's not an AR-style rifle, it's a truckload of fertilizer and kerosene, I mean, people are going to do what they're going to do if they have a mental illness. So to focus solely on the tool is a real problem. I think we're short-sighted.
But yet we have this exponential growth where just in the past 2 years there may have been 2.5 million ARs made in the United States, not for export.
That's correct. And yet you're not seeing, I mean, if you assume a cause and effect analysis and that there's somehow they're linked crime to production of firearms, then we should see crime spiking. And yet just the opposite is true. I mean, I remember when the assault weapons ban expired in 2004, politicians were up on Capitol screaming, those streets are going to run red with blood. But crime continues to drop. And I think the issue is not, I mean, again, root cause analysis, cause and effect analysis. Let's find the real reason why people aren't getting mental health services that they need. Let's find the real reason why people seem to want to act out these fantasies that are horrifying. I mean, I scarcely have the words to talk about what happened in Newtown. I mean, it has profoundly affected all of us. And just because I happen to work in the firearms industry doesn't mean that I'm not sensitive to this issue, or I have children. You don't think that, my daughter's a school teacher. You don't think it affects me personally? Of course it does. But to focus on the product as opposed to what I believe, and I think a lot of people believe, is the real issue here, I think it's giving the people of Connecticut a false sense of security.
Mike, if we do some or all of, certainly not all, but if we do a significant number of those other things, does a ban or does registration of rifles become a little bit less necessary?
Both a ban and
In other words, if we work on mental health, we work on the national criminal check system. If we do all the things that we've been talking about, other than a ban and registration of rifles, do those two measures, which are at the center of the argument, become a little bit less necessary?
No, I don't think so. I think this is and again. I know you're not suggesting this, Joe, but we are not focused on banning AR-15s and magazines. That is part of a comprehensive solution, and it's an important part. And most of the discussion that's taking place is dealing with I can go through a chapter and verse, all the various things that are going on right now as we speak at the Capitol on this topic, and most of it has nothing to do with banning stuff. That's what gets all the attention. I got it. That's the controversial part. No problem with that. But it is a part of the solution, and it is aimed at the individuals who, with increasing frequency, and there's no question, we're talking about a type of murder. We're talking about inexplicable targeting of as many innocent people as possible. That's what we're talking about. The frequency of that is increasing, and it's typically now using these types of weapons. That's what the problem is. That's one specific aspect of this problem. What's going on in the cities, different problem, requires a different solution, and we're working on that as well. And what's going on in people's homes, the domestic violence, that's a different problem, a different solution. But this one problem is very real, and the frequency is increasing, and that's what we're concerned about. So either it's going to stop or it's going to continue. If it continues, there's no question that there'll be a national ban on these types of weapons very soon. I mean, there's just no question about it. If it continues, that's what's going to happen. And so it's happened in Connecticut. It happened in Colorado. And that's where you see the response taking place. It happened 20 years ago in California, and they were the first one to do it. And on the manufacturing question, which was asked earlier, I didn't get a chance to respond. Yeah, keep in mind that in 1993, Connecticut enacted an assault weapon ban. It only covered enumerated weapons, but two of those weapons were the Colt AR-15 and the Colt Sporter. And to this day, those are banned in Connecticut over 20 years. Last year in Connecticut, Colt, according to Mr. Valou, who I asked, manufactured 90,000 of those two weapons alone, and those are banned in Connecticut. Colt is still here. They're still making guns, even though they're banned in our state. So I just wanted to get that statistic out there to be very clear about it.
I just want to respond just in part in saying that, criminals are going to do bad things with firearms. By definition, they're going to break the law, and banning firearm ownership on a law-abiding citizen is not going to change that fact. You talk about the assault weapons ban. I mean, look at the Columbine murder. It took place in 1999, right in the middle of the federal assault weapons ban. People who have evil intent and are going to, how's the war on drug going? You don't think people are getting drugs. People are going to get guns, and they're going to do bad things. So the issue is, let's find a way to control access to firearms by prohibited people. Okay? We don't want criminals to have firearms. So that's what we need to be focusing on, not infringing on law-abiding citizens' right to have the firearm of their choice.
I just want to, since Mark Twain sent a firearms maker from the 19th century to the 6th century of England to bring them to the future. Let's look to a technology that has some hope that's been a matter of controversy. A question from Kevin White. If we can ask car manufacturers to make cars safer, why not ask gun manufacturers to make guns safer? Imagine a gun that only an authorized user can fire. If it can be conceptualized, it can be accomplished. It could be just as simple as a unique mechanical key to start the gun. No key won't work. I've wondered that myself. Why is that not something we have now? And I know we've debated it in Connecticut.
We have it. It's called a cable lock. You put it on the gun, you have the key. You can unlock the gun when you want to unlock the gun. Okay? You want to talk about the so-called smart guns. We can talk about that. I mean, Mossberg themselves has invested hundreds of thousands of dollars in smart gun technology. We hold multiple patents on this technology. Our problem is it's unreliable. It doesn't work well enough. And when we went to focus groups like law enforcement and consumers, they said, I don't want to have a gun that I have to have some kind of special ring. Because what happens if I have to, if my wife needs to use that gun to defend us? Now I haven't got a ring. I haven't got a special decoder. Her palm doesn't fit the grip size. I have to change hands. There's a whole host of real practical issues that go along with this thing. So, it sounds great. Look, the theory is great. We put our money where our mouth is and invested in this technology. But in actual fact, it doesn't work that way. And anyone that knows firearms will understand that the recoil forces involved in a firearm make those little wires and sensors and batteries fail at the worst possible time. And I think anyone who's going to use that firearm for self-defense is not going to want that. And I'll tell you something. The police don't want it. They don't want it. They're not going to accept it. Because we've already been down there where we've asked. And they, if it was practical, we'd be on the market with it because there's a profit incentive there for inventors. Okay? But in point of fact, we've been down that road, and it's not bearing any fruit at this moment. Now, that's not to say it's someday, but at this moment in time, I would suggest that it's something that's not practical.
Mike, I want to combine the last question with your answer to that. And the last question for both of you, unfortunately, we are out of time, which is we could go on for, I know, several hours. I know I could. And the last question is, do you feel... I don't know. This is a topic of, do you feel, Mike and Joe, that in the 2 months or 2 or 3 months of debate after the tragedy, have we come anywhere closer to a consensus on what needs to happen? Do you feel any optimism about where we are, or are we still right where we were at the start? Mike first.
Sure. Well, let me respond to the technology question, right? So let me just make a prediction. 20 years from now, there will be hundreds of thousands of Connecticut citizens who still lawfully own firearms. There's no question about that. I think the firearms are going to change. I think the technology will change a lot, and the regulation of it will change a lot. But use the word banning firearms. That won't happen across the board. There may be types of firearms that are either banned or more tightly regulated, but as I said at the outset, the constitutional right to own firearms in defense of yourself and the state will not ever disappear in this state. There's no question about that. But how that plays out over time is, my prediction would be there'll be a lot of technology involved in this over the next 20 years. Your question about have things changed since day one? Yes, they have. This topic was not even on the radar screen of the legislature. They would have never taken it up. But over the last 3 months, there's so many aspects of this that have been discussed and so many ideas that have been tossed into the hopper. Most of them are very good. They're technical, they're complicated, but I think they'll make a big difference. And as we sit here today, there's no question there's broad consensus in the legislature across both parties to make very significant changes in the rules that govern firearm ownership and responsible ownership in our state. There will be mental health interventions. There will be restrictions on certain types of firearms. There will be an expanded permit process. The details are being worked out now, but there is consensus. This will happen, and that's all happened in the last 101 days.
Joe, the last word on whether you feel optimistic that we've come any closer to a consensus?
No. I don't. I tell you, I've been back and forth to the legislature numerous times, meeting with my state rep and our state senator, and I've appeared 2 or 3 or 4 times in front of various committees and groups, and I guess it's like that, roller coaster ride. At some time, I think we're getting through. We're really having an impact, and people are starting to see at least the perspective of the manufacturers and the lawful firearms owners. Then the next thing, there's a statement from the governor which deflates my optimism, saying, "Oh, we have to do something quick and now and just do it." I don't like that. Just do it now for the sake of doing it. I like thoughtful debate and thoughtful discussion and really real substantive research on the issue. And like I said, I would say for me, I would chop this up into areas where we have consensus, small bites at it. Get the straw purchasing thing done and on the governor's desk and into the system. Same thing with gun trafficking, and then let's really talk about the gun issue part and parcel of the mental health thing, because what I saw lately from the governor is, the mental health thing is coming. We'll do the guns first, and we'll leave the mental health later. It's just like you have to read the bill, you get to sign the bill before you know what's in it. Kind of argument.
Okay.
I don't like that.
All right. Let's have a hand. A round of applause, not just for that answer, but for Mike Lawlor and Joe Bartozzi and the Mark. And thanks, especially, you have been a great audience. I only had to chide you once. And thanks to the Mark Twain House and Museum for hosting us tonight.
Thank you.